Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. So I hope everyone is well and thank you to everyone who's tuned in for any of my episodes for my podcast. So for episode 7, I've decided to read the third and final story in my horror trilogy called Three Tales of Terror, which is available on Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. So the third story in the book is called The Basement of Hell. So let's dig in. Story 3, The Basement of Hell. Chapter 1. Rasmina Tazwin was enjoying her evening, watching a film on Sunday night with her mum, dad, and older brother. They were watching a made-for-TV movie about a married woman having an affair. It was 10 p.m. and the film had just finished. Rasmina loved her home life and worked as a part-time GP receptionist. Rasmina was 34 years old. Rasmina's mum, Pasana, was a teaching assistant who worked at a primary school. Rasmina's dad, Derek, was a taxi driver. Rasmina's brother Adwin, who was 37 years old, was a work coach at the local job centre. "What time are you starting work tomorrow, Rasmina?" Rasmina's dad, Derek, asked. I've got an afternoon shift tomorrow, so not until 1:30 p.m, Rasmina responded. "All right for some," Adwin grumbled. "I've got to be out of the house by 8:30 a.m, Adwin moaned. "Change jobs then," Rasmina snapped back. "Leave your sister alone," Rasmina's mum Pasana snapped. Adwin fell silent, glowering at Rasmina. "Women are always part-timers," Rasmina's dad continued, patting Adwin on the shoulder. "Your mum finishes work before 2 p.m. too," Derek jeered. "That's enough of that," Pasana told Derek firmly. Derek continued to stare at Pasana, smiling to himself. The adverts had finished on the TV and the news had begun. "I have some very disturbing news to report," the male newsreader said. The family stopped talking to one another and all tuned into the news story. 11 dead bodies have been found in a cave with their skin peeled off. The police found different tools with blood on them on the ground of the cave. "It looks like the victims were tortured with the different tools before being killed," the news reporter told the audience. Pasana gasped. Rasmina stared at the TV, feeling shocked and scared. "Gross," Adwin stated. "I'm feeling queasy." The news switched over to the scene of the crime. A reporter was standing in front of some trees. A cave could be seen behind her. Police officers were in the background. "Extremely distressing scenes," the female news reporter informed the audience. "How were the bodies discovered?" the male news reporter asked the female. The news switched back to the female reporter at the scene. "A group of people were hiking and came across the cave and found the bodies skinned and called the police," the female news reporter replied. A new headline appeared at the bottom of the screen stating, 11 dead bodies found skinned in cave in Yorkshire. Rasmina gasped. Her and her family lived in Yorkshire. "Near us," Rasmina gasped, feeling shocked. "Oh dear," Derek muttered. Pasana lifted her hand to her mouth in shock. The news reporters were still talking to one another. "Any idea who the assailants are yet?" the male news reporter asked. The screen switched back to the female reporter, who responded, saying, "The killers are on the loose. The police have no idea who they are yet or how many of them there are," the female reporter told the viewers. "Thank you," the male reporter said to the female reporter, who nodded her head. The focus turned back to himself. "Please stay vigilant. If anyone sees anything suspicious or think they have any information, please call this number," the male reporter told the viewers. A number to call appeared at the bottom of the screen. The reporter paused while the channel switched over to adverts again. "Ah, that's so scary," Rasmina exclaimed. "Skinner killers on the loose," Rasmina continued. "Why does it have to be near us?" Pasana moaned. "Scary for sure. Scary and gross," Adwin complained. "Well, hopefully you two part-timers will be okay," Derek responded to all. "Oi!" Pasana called out, throwing a cushion at her husband. "I was joking," Derek responded. Pasana shook her head and looked back at the TV. Derek laughed. Let's flick through the music video channels before we go to bed, Adwen suggested. Some light relief from the news. Okay, dear, Pisana responded. Pisana switched over to the music video channels. The family all stared at the screen, trying to process the horrific news. Chapter 2. It was Friday evening. Rasmina was glad it was the weekend. The work week went by as usual. Rasmina had felt a little scared walking from work to home in the evenings whenever she finished her shift with the sadistic killers out there somewhere. The news hadn't reported there being any progress on finding the killers yet. Rasmina's dad Derek had gone to drop Rasmina's mum Pisana off to a work party in a hotel. The members of staff had organised a work party for the staff at the primary school Pisana worked at. Rasmina's brother Adwen was watching TV in his room, in his usual grumpy mood about work. Rasmina was in her bedroom. It was 7:45 p.m. She had ordered a lamp for her bedroom. It had just been delivered. Rasmina had opened the packaging. She looked frustrated seeing it was battery-operated instead of plug-operated. Where can I find some batteries? Rasmina asked herself out loud. Rasmina thought for a moment and remembered that her dad kept batteries downstairs in the basement. Rasmina left her room and walked down the stairs. She made her way to the closed basement door. The door was white. Rasmina opened the basement door. It was dark in the basement. Rasmina switched on the light. She walked down the basement stairs. The room was full of various DIY building tools. There was an old Hoover in the corner of the basement. Rasmina frowned, wondering where the batteries might be. Rasmina looked at the lower cupboards in the basement. Maybe there are batteries in there, Rasmina thought to herself. She walked over to the cupboards, kneeled on the floor, and opened one of them. There was some sellotape and measuring tapes in one, but nothing else. Rasmina sighed, feeling frustrated. She closed the cupboard doors and opened the next cupboard, hoping to locate some batteries for her lamp. She opened the cupboard to find an old, large biscuit tin. Maybe there are batteries in the tin, Rasmina thought to herself. She grabbed the tin eagerly, hoping to find batteries, and took the lid off. Rasmina dropped the lid. It clattered on the basement floor. Rasmina swallowed, shock filling her insides. Inside the tin were a selection of silver tools. They all had blood on them. Rasmina's hand began to shake. Rasmina looked at a wrench and gasped. There was a piece of skin hanging off it. Rasmina cried out quietly. She picked up the wrench and looked at it in horror. "What are you doing?" a deep voice said behind her. Rasmina dropped the wrench, frozen in horror. Chapter 3. Rasmina turned around to see her dad, Derek, standing at the bottom of the basement stairs. She quickly dropped the tin of tools with blood on them back into the cupboard. Rasmina quickly stood up. Nothing, Rasmina responded. Derek stared at his daughter in silence. Rasmina felt fear clog her throat. The killers skinning their victims were someone in Rasmina's family, in this very house. Rasmina hoped her dad wouldn't notice the wrench with the piece of skin hanging off it which had fallen onto the floor. Rasmina tried not to tremble, thinking quickly to herself in her head. Who can it be? Mum, Dad, or Adwen? Rasmina thought to herself in her head. I can't believe the killer is in this house. Derek continued to stare at his daughter in silence. I was just looking for some batteries, Rasmina stammered. Derek glanced at Rasmina's empty hands. For what? Derek asked his daughter. Rasmina struggled to gather her thoughts. For a lamp I brought. It's upstairs, Rasmina stuttered. Dread filled Rasmina as she saw her dad glance at the wrench on the basement floor, with the skin hanging off it. Derek grimaced, cocking his head to the side. You know, Derek said coolly in a low voice. No, what? Rasmina quickly spluttered. Derek nodded at the wrench. Well, what? I didn't notice anything, Rasmina cried out. Derek smiled an evil grin at his daughter. Rasmina's eyes widened in horror, working out who the killer in the house was. Adwen, Derek shouted out, your sister knows about us. Rasmina gasped, panic filling her insides, realizing that her brother was also one of the killers. How can this be? Rasmina thought to herself in her head. How can my dad and brother be the monsters torturing and killing and skinning their victims and leaving their bodies in a cave? Rasmina stared at her dad. She was frozen in place. What? Adwin shouted down. It sounded like he was in the living room. I said, your sister knows about us. She found the tools we quickly hid away last time we were out doing you-know-what, Derek shouted up. Rasmina gasped. She couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like her whole world was turning upside down, a horror film becoming her life. Why is this happening to me? Rasmina uttered to herself in her head. Adwin began trotting down the basement stairs. He was wearing black jogging bottoms and a black hoodie. Derek, her dad, was in a black leather jacket and dark blue jeans. He hadn't changed yet after dropping Pisana off at her work party. Adwin stopped, standing next to his dad, Derek, and began glowering at Rasmina. Adwin glanced at the wrench. Ah, Adwin seethed. That's too bad. We weren't going to kill you and Mum until later, Adwin announced, glaring at Rasmina. No, Rasmina screamed. She did the only thing she could think of doing. She ran around her dad and brother Adwin so they couldn't catch her. Her dad tried to grab Rasmina's sleeve as she managed to run around them, taking them by surprise. She managed to pull her sleeve out of her dad's grip. Rasmina hurried up the basement stairs. She could hear her brother and dad jeering. Rasmina ran out of the basement and towards the front door of the house, which was by the stairs. Rasmina! Get back here, she heard her dad shout from the basement. Rasmina cried out as she heard them begin to climb the basement stairs. Rasmina flung the door open. She cried out, running as fast as she could, trying not to let her heavy breathing slow her down. She ran off the porch, a twig scratching against her face as she ran. She noticed dirt on her white jumper sleeve as she ran. Rasmina did the only thing she could think of. Opposite her row of houses was a large green field. Rasmina ran across it as fast as she could and eventually reached the bushes on the other side of the field. There was a school gate behind her. It was the gate of a primary school. Rasmina crawled down through the bushes to the far end of the field. She hid. She was trembling and trying to regain her breath. She put her hand into her pocket and felt her mobile phone there. Oh, thank God, Rasmina whispered. Rasmina dialed 999. Which emergency service do you need? The voice said down the phone. Police, fire brigade, or ambulance? Please, please, hurry, I'm in danger, Rasmina cried out as quietly as she could down the phone. The phone switched to a new voice. Police, what's your emergency? The voice said down the phone. Please help me. My dad and brother are the Skinner killers. I found their toolkit in our basement. They're chasing me. Please help me. I'm hiding in some bushes, Rasmina told the operator, trembling in fear. Okay, what is your address and name? The voice on the other end of the line asked. Rasmina quickly gave her address and name. I ran across the large green field near our house. You can't miss it. I'm hiding in the bushes opposite, Rasmina told the person speaking on the other end. Please hurry, Rasmina pleaded. Stay where you are. We will be there as quick as we can. Stay hidden. Hang up the phone now so they can't hear you, the voice sounding worried on the other end of the line instructed her. Rasmina abruptly ended the call, putting her phone back in her pocket. Rasmina prayed and prayed, begging for her dad and brother not to find her. She gasped quietly as she heard her dad's voice. She looked through a tiny gap in the bushes and could see them both standing there, searching the length of the bushes from the other side. We know you're in there somewhere, Derek called out to his daughter. You want to know what our motive is, me and your brothers? Well, I won't call him my favourite child. That's not fair. But we both feel the same way about life. I want vengeance on anyone I think is better looking than me or more popular than me, whether they're from school or work or live down the road. And your brother enjoys the same revenge on his school year too, Derek declared to his daughter. Rasmina listened, trembling in fear, whimpering, trying not to be heard. She begged again for them not to find her in her head. Rasmina couldn't get her head around the motive. They were monsters. That's all she knew. So, we skinned the ones we're jealous of because they're better looking than us. Me and Dad compared our faces to theirs, Adwin cackled. I love it, Adwin cackled. We've got the greatest dad alive. We would have asked you and Mum if you wanted vengeance on anyone you're jealous of from whichever stage of life, but we knew you'd be spoilsports and say no. We weren't going to kill you and your mum until later, Derek shouted to Rasmina. Guess why? Derek called out. Rasmina heard her brother Adwin laugh evilly. We got sick and tired of everyone asking us how you and your mum are all the time. That's all anyone ever asks us. How's Pisana and how's Rasmina? No one ever inquires about me and Adwin. Do they, Adwin? Derek asked his son. Adwin laughed. No, he responded, spluttering into laughter again. No one ever asks about us, Adwin lashed out, screaming. Rasmina trembled, placing her hand in front of her mouth so they wouldn't hear her. She shook violently, praying these monsters who used to be her dad and brother never found her, hiding there. The next moment, Rasmina heard 2 loud big bangs. She heard her dad and Adwin cry out. Rasmina breathed again. She felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She quickly answered it. Ma'am, the coast is clear. Your dad and brother have been shot in the leg. You can come out of the bushes now, the voice down the phone instructed her. Rasmina whispered, Thank you, and crawled out of the bushes. As she hurriedly rushed out of the bushes, she saw her dad Derek and Adwin laying on the ground, both groaning. They had both been shot in the leg. Rasmina screamed for a moment and then rushed into the arms of a female police officer who was holding out her arms to her. Rasmina sobbed into the police officer's shoulder. The nightmare was over. She had survived. It was the next day. Rasmina's mum had met her at the police station. She broke into tears and hugged Rasmina. They cried together. Rasmina had given the police her statement. Pisana had spoken to the police too to give a statement. How could they do this? Pisana cried into her daughter's hair. Thank God I have you. Thank God you're safe, Pisana cried. Rasmina continued sobbing into her mum's shoulder until a police officer later took them both home. The police had told Pisana and Rasmina that with a crime of this magnitude, Derek and Adwin would certainly be spending the rest of their days in prison until they died. Pisana and Rasmina were grateful to hear this. They held onto each other as they left the police station, wondering how Rasmina's dad and brother, Pisana's husband and son, could have become the monsters they turned out to be. Rasmina and Pisana trembled together, both grateful that they were both safe and together. They were glad that the two would rot in prison, never to see the outside world again. The end. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening to my story, The Basement of Hell, from my book 3 Tales of Terror. Turn the page if you dare, which is available on Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. So that's story 3, The Basement of Hell, by myself, Priya Grewal. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in for episode 7 of my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Grewal. Take care, everyone, and have a fabulous week. Until next time.